Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to continue solving linear equations, but this time our equations are going to have fractions in it. So you'll notice the coefficient of x is 3/4, and this constant's a half, and we have the number 1, which can be written as 1/1, or its equivalent. Okay, so the first thing you want to do in this lesson, is to clear the fractions, and we're going to start talking about multiplying both sides by the LCD. And so if you look at your equation, there are three terms. There's this term here, 3/4 x. There's this term, -1/2. And then there's this term. And so if you look at all the denominators on both sides, 4, 2, and remember this right here is understood to be 1/1. The LCD would be 4. So the smallest number that 4, 2, and this denominator 1 will go into is 4. So my LCD is 4. All right, once you find the LCD, then you're going to multiply both sides by that LCD. Now, it's going to be important that you remember that there will be situations where you're going to have to enclose either one side or both sides in parentheses. So to figure that out, just think of this. So this side right here has two terms. So if you have more than one term, so 2 or more, then what I would do first is put this in parentheses. So in other words, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. Something like this. And then over here, since that's just one term, just leave it as that one. So that you do not need parentheses here. And the reason for that is because, remember, we have to multiply both sides by the LCD. So it's like an equation, like a balance scale. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I'm going to multiply this side by 4, and then multiply this side by 4. All right, so notice the everything in here, everything inside the parentheses has to be multiplied by 4. So that's why we use parentheses. Okay, so then I'm going to use a distributive property. So I did step 1. Now the step 2 through however many steps we need will be very similar to what we've been doing before. So you use distributive property. Now you got to be careful. You're saying 4 times 3/4 x. So 4 times 3/4 x. And so you got to multiply these terms or these factors. So 4 to 4 is 1, 4 to 4 is 1, and so I get 1 times 3 times x, which is 3x. Remember, the whole purpose of multiplying by the LCD is to clear your fractions, is to clear those denominators. So, in other words, this 4 at some point better become a 1, and it does, see? Right here. So you should be able to clear those fractions. So 4 times 3/4 x, so if you need to rewrite it and do your work, then go ahead and rewrite it and do your work. So 4 times 3/4 x is 3x. Minus, and then you're going to say 4 times 1/2. So 4 times 1/2. And so 4 times 1/2, remember that's 4/1. Let's reduce first. 2 into 2 is 1. 2 into 4 is 2. So I get 2 times 1 is 2. So you get 3x minus 2. Mistake people make is I'm going to show you what they do, and you got to be careful. So do not make that mistake. They'll do this. They'll say 4 to 4 is 1, 4 to 4 is 1, and then distribute the 1. You cannot do that. That's incorrect. You have to do the distributive property first. So don't make the mistake of reducing this first denominator with the coefficient out here, with this number out here, with this factor out here, and then distribute whatever factor you have left. That's incorrect because it is not 3x minus 1/2. Okay, so we just saw it's actually 3x minus 2. So you have to be careful. Distribute first, and then reduce. Don't reduce these first. That's mathematically incorrect because then you'll be distributing the wrong factor. You need to be distributing a 4. So everything inside of here, inside the parentheses, every term has to be multiplied by 4. Okay, and then 1 times 4 is 4. Alright, so now notice I have a linear equation, and these are all linear, but I have this linear equation that does not have any fractions in it and no parentheses, so now I'm going to use the addition property of equality. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides, and then I can combine like terms. So -2 plus 2 is 0, so I get 3x equals 6, and then divide both sides by 3, the multiplication property of equality, and then reduce and simplify. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 1 times x is x. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So there's your solution. All right, number 2. Number 2, suppose we had x plus 5/4 equals 3/4 x. So x plus 5/4 equals 3/4 x. So again, I have parentheses on both sides, and I have three terms again. This term, which can be written as x over 1. So in other words, you can write it like this. In your mind, that's what you would see. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it as this. Okay. So when talking about the LCD, you're going to look at all your denominators. So this is 1, this is 4, this is 4. So the LCD is 4. And then you're going to, just like we did, you're going to multiply, you're going to clear your fractions. So you're going to multiply both sides by the LCD. Now, since this side has two terms, more than one term, I'm going to put that in parentheses. So go ahead and rewrite it. So put that in parentheses. Since that's just one term, I'll leave it alone. And I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. Okay, just like this. So this side by 4, this side by 4. And again, every term you see has to be multiplied by 4. So then you use distributive property. So you can say 4 times x is 4x. That part was easy. And over here, 4 times 5/4. So 4 over 1 times 5/4. That's what you're dealing with. 4 times 5/4. 4 into 4 is 1. 4 into 4 is 1. So you get 1 times 5, which is 5. You get 5. You get 4x plus 5 equal. And over here, let me just go ahead and rewrite it. So that's 4 times 3/4 x. 4 into 4 is 1. 4 into 4 is 1. So 1 times 3 times x is 3x. Okay. All right, now what I'm going to do, since I have variables on both sides and just a constant on the left, I'm going to leave the constant here. I'm going to bring the variables to the right-hand side. All right, so it does not matter. You just got to be careful how you do this, though. So I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. Now, when I do that, again, be careful of the coefficient on this side. 4x minus 4x is 0. 0 plus 5 is 5, equal. And then over here, 3x minus 4x is a negative x. So 3x and a negative 4x is a negative x, which is the same thing as, say, negative 1x. And then to get the variable x by itself, remember you want a coefficient of a positive 1 here, not a negative 1. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1. And so negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. 1 times x is x, equal. And then 5 divided by negative 1 is a negative 5. So there's your solution. Okay, number 3. Okay, number 3, suppose you had, let's see, suppose you had 3/4 x minus 1 plus, that's plus 1/2 x equal 5/12 x plus 1/6. So 3/4 x minus 1 plus 1/2 x equals 5/12 x plus 6. All right, so look at all your denominators. Now over here you have three terms. You have 3/4 x, a negative 1, and a positive 1/2 x. And over here you have 5/12 x and then a 6. So if you look at all the denominators, 4, remember this is understood to have denominator 1, 4, 1, 2, 12, and 6. The smallest number that 4, 1, 2, 12, and 6 go into is 12. So the LCD is 12. So then multiply both sides by 12. So the first thing you're going to do is clear your fractions. So multiply both sides by 12. So I'm going to enclose both sides in parentheses now because I do have more than one term. So I'm going to do this first. So 3/4 times x minus 1 plus 1/2 x equal, and over here, 5/12 x plus 1/6. All right. And then multiply by 12. So 12, 12. So what you do one side, you have to do the other. And now since I have parentheses, I'm going to use the distributive property. So multiply everything in here by 12, and multiply everything in here by 12. So every term you see has to be multiplied by 12. Okay, now let's distribute the 12. So you may need to do some work on the side. Again, do not make the mistake and say 4 into 4 is 1, 4 into 12 is 3, and distribute the 3. That's incorrect. So remember, let's talk about this. Do not make this mistake. So don't say 4 into 4 is 1, 4 into 12 is 3, and then distribute the 3. You cannot do that. That's mathematically incorrect. Remember, every term has to be multiplied by 12. So if you think about what you're doing, you're multiplying these two by 3, and they're supposed to be multiplied by 12. So do not do this first. So that's incorrect. So that's not correct. Okay? So you got to distribute the 12. So you're going to say 12 times 3/4 x, right? I'm going to write this as 12 over 1, and then we reduce. 4 into 4 is 1, 4 into 12 is 3, and then 3 times x is 9x. So that's 9x right here. 12 times a negative 1 is a negative 12. See, if you had made that mistake here, you would have said minus 3. Subtract 3, negative 3, and that's incorrect. It's negative 12. Plus, and then 12 times 1/2 x, so that's 12 over 1. So 2 into 2 is 1, 2 into 12 is 6. I get 6 times 1 times x is 6x. Equal, and then do the same thing here. 12 times 5 12x. 12 and 12 is 1, 12 and 12 is 1, so 1 times 5 times x is 5x. And then 12 times 1 6 is just 2. Okay? Alright, so now I use a distributive property. The next step is to combine like terms if you can, and I can here. So 9x plus 6x is, what's that, 15x? So 15x minus 12 equal 5x plus 2. All right, I have variables on both sides, constant. So notice I no longer have fractions. So that's a good thing. That's what I wanted to do. I did not want to deal with fractions. So the first thing you do is clear your fractions. So now I'm going to subtract 5x on both sides. And so 15x minus 5x is 10x minus 12 equal, combine like terms here, I'm left with 0 plus 2 is 2. And then adding 12 to both sides, add the addition property of equality, and then combining like terms, I get 10x equal, what's that, 14? All right. And so then I'm going to divide both sides by 10 to get the variable x by itself. 10 divided by 10 is 1, 1 times x is x, and then reduce if you can. So I can reduce here, so that'll be 7 over 5. And so that's your solution. So your solution is 7/5. All right, let's look at this one, number 4. So number 4, you have 3x plus 5/16 equals 3/4 minus 1/8 x minus 1/2. So 3x plus 5/16 equals 3/4 minus 8x minus 1/2. All right, so just like before, we're going to find the LCD. So if you look at all these, that's 3x over 1. So we have 1, 16, 4, 8, and 2. The LCD is 16. So the smallest number that those numbers will go into. So now I'm going to multiply both sides by 16. So I'm going to put both of these sides in parentheses. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this over, and then put in parentheses both sides. And so I'm going to say times 16 times 16, and then we distribute. Okay, so 16 times 3 is going to be, what's that, 48? So I get 48x plus, and then 16 times 5/16, so that's going to be 5. Equal, so notice I clear the fractions. 16 times 3/4, if you need to rewrite that and work it out, that's fine. 4 into 4 is 1, 4 into 16 is 4, 4 times 3 is 12. So 16 times 3/4 is 12. Minus 16 times an eighth, that will be 2x. So 16 times an eighth x is 2x. Minus, and then 16 times a half. 16 times a half is 8. Okay, so that's where I'm at. Okay, so I've cleared the fractions. Now the next thing you want to do is combine like terms. I get 48x plus 5 equal, now this is 12, I can combine the constants. 12 minus 8 is 4, so I get 4 minus 2x. Now again, I have variables on both sides, constant to the other, so I'm going to bring the variables to the left. So I'm going to add 2x to both sides. And so 40, and then combine like terms, so I use the addition property of equality. So then combine like terms, 48x plus 2x is 50x plus 5 equal, and then that's 0 here, 4 plus 0 is 0. These are opposites, so when you combine like terms, when the terms are additive inverses or opposites and you add them up, you get 0. And that's going to be 4 right here. That's 4. So now I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides, and then combine like terms again. I get 50x equal 4, and a negative 5 is a negative 1. And then finally divide both sides by 50. We're using multiplication property of equality, and then we're going to simplify and reduce. 50 divided by 50 is 1. 1 times x is x, and then that's negative 1/50th. So that's your solution. Okay, number 5. All right, number 5, let's suppose we had this. All right, suppose we had 7 times 2x minus 1 divided by 3 equal, let's say, 5x plus 2. 5x plus 2. Okay, so notice that for right now, think of this right here as one fraction. Okay, so you have this numerator and this denominator. So that's one fraction, one term. Just think of this as one term. Over here, think of these as two terms. So you have this 5x over 1 and then there's 2 over 1. So over here, you have the denominator 3 and you have a 1 here and a 1 there. Okay, so what I was doing this. Okay, and so the LCD would be 3. So let me go ahead and rewrite what my original equation. Okay, now remember we talked about it in terms of parentheses. Do I need parentheses around here? Yes, because you have more than one term. So you're gonna put this in parentheses and you can say times 3. Okay, so you're gonna multiply both sides by the LCD. So you multiply everything in here by 3. Now over here, this room, that's one term, so don't put that as a fract in parentheses. Just leave it as you see it and say times 3. So times 3 times 3, and now you're going to reduce. So look, 3 into 3 is 1, 3 into 3 is 1. Okay, and notice what you have. Now you got to be careful because you're going to see a problem in a little while. See, that's a 1 here, so you're going to say 1 times 7 is 7. So that's 7 right here. When you multiply that out, that's 7. And then you can distribute the 7. So you're going to say 7 times 2x is 14x, and then 7 times a negative 1 is a negative 7, and then that's divided by 1. Okay, so all this right here is 14x minus 7. That's all that is. Okay, equal, and then distribute the 3. 3 times 5x is 15x. 3 times a positive 2 is a positive 6. Okay, now I clear the fractions. All right, so then I'm going to bring once we get to that point here, that's something we've been doing for a while now. So just bring the variables one side, constant the other. It does not matter which side you bring the variables on. I'm just going to bring on the left just to remind you about something. So I'm going to subtract 15x from both sides. And then the reminder is this: 14x and a negative 15x is a negative x, or you can write as a negative 1x. Does not matter. Minus 7 equal, and that's 0. 0 plus 6 is 6. Then adding 7 to both sides, and then combine like terms, I get negative, I'm going to write this as negative 1x. Negative 1x equal 13, and divide both sides by negative 1, because remember, trying to get a 1 here, a 1x, not a negative 1x. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. 1 times x is x, and then 13 divided by negative 1 is a negative 13. Okay, so that's your solution. Okay, number 6, suppose we had this. All right, suppose we had this in number 6. Okay, suppose we had, let's make that a negative 2 times 3x plus 2 divided by, let's say 5 equal, and let's make that a 2x divided by 3 minus 1. All right. So this is what we have. And so if you look, again, think of this as one fraction. See, this is one fraction, numerator, denominator. So that's how you want to think about this for right now. And these would be two terms. So 5, 3, and this is a 1 down here. Negative 1 divided by 1. So the LCD is 15 this time. Okay, now watch how we can discuss this. Okay, so I'm going to put this in parentheses. 2x divided by 3 minus 1. And then since that's just one fraction, leave it alone. Just going to do this for right now. Okay, so I'm going to multiply this side by 15, and I'm going to multiply this side by 15. Okay, so remember, clearing the fractions, you multiply both sides by 15. Notice I put this in parentheses because everything has to be multiplied by 15. And then I'm leaving this alone, so be careful. Not all this is being multiplied by 15. So that's why you want to be careful with this. Think of this as one thing, one term, one fraction. Okay, Okay, now let's reduce the 5 and the 15. Remember, the whole purpose of multiplying by the LCD is to clear those denominators, to make those denominators 1s. 5 and a 5 is 1. 5 and a 15 is 3. Okay, now, remember a while ago, we said this. 3 and a 3 is 1. 3 and a 3 is 1. And we said this 1 times 7 is 7. And then we distribute the 7. Okay, so it helps if you circle this and put that new number right above it, that new factor. So over here, you say 5 and a 5 is 1, 5 and a 15 is 3, and then you're going to say 3 times a negative 2. See, that's multiplication. 3 times a negative 2 is a negative 6, and then you distribute the negative 6. Okay? So negative 6 times 3x is a negative 18x. Negative 6 times a positive 2 is a negative 12. So that's what you get. Equal, and over here, you're going to get 15 times 2/3 x. And then let's reduce. 3 and 3 is 1. 3 and 15 is 5. 5 times 2 times x is 10x. That's 10x. And then 15 times a negative 1 is a negative 15. Okay. So now I have variables on both sides, constant the other. So let's bring the variables to the left. So I'm going to subtract 10x from both sides. And then I'm going to combine like terms. A negative 18x and a negative 10x is a negative 28x minus 12 equal, that's 0. 0 and negative 15 is a negative 15. And then adding 12 to both sides, and then combine like terms, I get negative 28x is equal to a negative 3. And then divide both sides by negative 28, just like this, and then reduce and simplify. Negative 28 divided by negative 20 is a positive 1. 1 times x is x. And then negative divided by negative is a positive, so the answer is going to be 3 over 28. Okay, so there's your solution. All right, so let's do one more that looks like this. So it's going to be number 7. So let's see, number 7, you're going to have, let's say you had this. Let's say you had negative 4 times 2x minus 3 over 5 equal, let's say, 7 times 3x minus 1 divided by, let's say 10. Let's say 10. Oh, let's make it 2. I'm sorry. Let's make it 2. Let's do that 2. Okay, so that's what I have. Now notice I have this equation. There are fractions involved. And I want you to think about this. So you see this is one fraction, this is one fraction. All right, so this fraction, that denominator is a 5. This fraction, that denominator is a 2. And so the LCD will be 10. I'm going to have to multiply both sides by 10. Okay, so now remember, since this is just one fraction and this is one fraction, I'm not going to put that in parentheses. So all I'm going to do is this. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. Okay, so I'm going to say times, remember that's negative 4, so be careful, that's negative 4. So times 10, and then times 10, okay? So I multiplied this fraction by 10, and multiplied this fraction by 10. So remember, what you do one side, you have to do the other. And so multiplying by the LCD is going to clear this denominator. In other words, that's going to be a 1. So watch what happens. I'm going to rewrite this over just to kind of put in that step. So I'm just rewriting that equation over. Okay, so you can say 5 and a 5 is 1, 5 and a 10 is 2. And remember what we said, you got to say 2 times negative 4 first. Okay, so remember the order of operations, you multiply from left to right. So don't distribute first, do this first. So 2 times negative 4 is a negative 8. Then distribute the negative 8. Okay? So negative 8 times 2x is a negative 16x, and negative 8 times a negative 3 is a positive 24. Equal, do the same thing here. 2 and a 2 is 1. Remember, you want a 1 down here. That's the whole purpose of multiplying by the LCD. You want a 1. 2 and a 2 is 1. 2 and a 10 is 5. Now again, don't distribute the 7 first. You got to do the multiplication first from left to right. 5 times 7, then times. So 5 times 7 is 35. Now I did not mean this to be a big number, but you're going to distribute the 35 this time. So 35 times 3 is going to be 105. Okay, So you got 105x. Again, I did not mean for this to be a big number. And then 35 times a negative 1 is a negative 35. Okay, so that's where we're at. So now let's bring all the variables to one side, constant the other. This time let's bring the variables to the right. So I'm going to add 16x to both sides. So I'm using the addition property of equality to combine like terms. A negative 16x and a positive 16x is 0. 0 plus 24 is 24. Equal, and this is going to be 121x. So 105x and 16x, 121x, and then minus 35. I'm going to add 35 to both sides. So I'm bringing all the constants to the other side now. So when I combine like terms, that's going to be a 59 equals 121x. And then finally, I'm going to divide both sides by 121. And so 121 divided by 121 is 1. 1 times x is x. And then I'm going to get 59 divided by 121. And then you cannot reduce this, so there's your solution. Okay? All right, so that's how you're going to deal with fractions. So notice if you go back to all the problems, the first thing we did, first step, is to clear your fraction by multiplying both sides of the LCDs. So notice what happens when it looks like this. Okay, and then notice what happens when some of the equations look like this, when the original looks like this. Okay? All right, so that's the end of this session.